All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. Today we're going to try a little screen sharing. So I'm going to see if I can play this. Actually, I think I'm going to leave it like this. So today we're going to continue our breathing movement pattern that we were talking about, and we're going to be focusing on the Moro. So just as a little recap, last week we talked about the withdraw pattern. It's not movement patterns. So this is the fear paralysis, and the fear paralysis, if you haven't watched the video about fear paralysis, just scroll down. It's not that far down in the feed. It is a safety mechanism of the cells and of the system from danger. It should be integrated in the womb. So the fear paralysis comes out early, like in the first trimester, and it should be integrated in the room in the presence of the Moro, which we're going to be talking about today, yet should be able to be turned on when needed. Basically, the fear paralysis in the functional medicine world is the cell danger response. And the exposure to, which is the response to exposure to toxins or foreign objects in the body. Kids on the spectrum and those with chronic disease, this response tends to be stuck in the on position. So even if if the danger is lifted, the body is just always in this response mode, doesn't know what to do. And it's a lack of homeostasis of the cells and its environment, which projects on later on a physical and emotional level. So the cells are protecting itself, and then the body and an emotion, it's kind of how the person is in to protect herself. And also, an unintegrated fear paralysis may cause oversensitivity to touch, sound, light, sudden changes in the visual field, a sense of smell and taste, the vestibular or proprioceptive stimulation. And we're actually going to find that that's pretty much the same thing also with the Moro. The stress responses associated with the fear paralysis are sweating, nausea, rapid drop in blood pressure, and going white with fear. In a frozen state when stressed or anger, and like I think I said in last week, I just imagine myself that if I could run and make a thoughtful getaway decision. Social embarrassment, poor adaptability, difficult with transitions, shyness, or isolation. And this can be very extreme, or everybody might be somewhat shy in certain circumstances, but it's when it gets to be a little bit more extreme. Eager to please. So kids with fear paralysis, these are the kids that are eager to please to avoid confrontation, which again is myself. I tend to do that. Perfectionism, myself. Having phobias, low peripheral vision. They have this tunnel vision, and low eye contact. Excuse my spelling there. And they may have to compensate by staring without blinking. So they kind of force themselves to stare without blinking. So, when you're blinking, you're kind of in a more relaxed state. So we're going to look at today with the Moro. And so I wanted to show you, this is the reason I wanted to screen share, so I could show you like a couple little video clips. And in the Moro, this is when we test a baby, we want it to be active because they're newborn.
Elicit the Moro Reflex by having him relax, unsuspecting, and then give him a sudden stimulus. And there's a good Moro. Quiet and headline midline. And then just give a stimulus of dropping him back a few inches. And that's a good normal response. Okay.
Okay, so as you can see, the stimulus is the drop in the head position, and then that is a startle. You probably have seen this when somebody closes the door, or maybe somebody drops something, and so a sudden noise So sudden stimulus will elicit this response. And what we notice is the first pattern, well, actually, I'll show you, I think it's on here. So the Moro is needed for first breath. There, I felt like I was missing a page. To take the first breath of air when it's born. I don't know if you know, a long time ago, I mean, from what I understood, when the babies were born, they used to put them upside down and spank them, right? So, you know, putting them upside down is dropping the head to elicit that startle response to take that gasp of air. Because part of what they're doing when they do that is they gasp in for air when they open out their arms, and then when they bring them in, then that's when they start to cry. So when they're born, they've been in flexation for about 9 months. And so they have, so this helps them get out of that, you know, they're bent forward. So it helps them be able to extend themselves. It helps prepare the baby for maintaining the head position. Oh, should have checked my spelling before I did this. The head position, and to develop the lando and spinal Perez reflex, which we're going to talk about in another week. The Moro response occurs as a result of both nerve and muscle stimulation and release of adrenaline and cortisol. So there's an increase of blood pressure in circulation, an increased amount of oxygen taken into the body. The pupils dilate, it decreases digestion. The cortisol helps bring in stored glucose from the muscles into the blood for greater energy for fight or flight. So, you know, I probably should fix this while I'm here. Sorry. Okay, and sorry. So basically what's happening is this is that whole, you know, fight or flight, sympathetic. We're going to look at in a second the nervous system. So this is the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight. And what's happening is the glucose from the parts of the body, like the digestion, that it doesn't need in order to escape. It's giving the blood and the glucose to the large muscles, the running muscles, the heart, you know, the heart rate is going to go faster, so you can run and flee and run away from that lion that's chasing you or whatever. Okay, so it occurs from head position. So we saw in the video, it occurs from the head position changing, or sudden changes of light, noise, temperature, pain, and smell. I had students that would be working with me in the classroom, and the phone would ring. So, you know, we had a phone in our classroom, and the phone would ring, and I'd have a couple students that had a severe Moro response, and, you know, a sixth grader, but literally jumping out of their chair when the phone would ring. So I could measure, if you have a child like that, you can measure progress by just noticing over time their decrease in the reaction to things like that. The Moro is a sympathetic response of the nervous system, whereas, so that's what we're saying, whereas the fear paralysis shuts the system down, okay? In both cases, the parasympathetic response is not working. The vagus nerve, which is in control of the parasympathetic response, is not working. But the fear paralysis just shuts the system down. The Moro helps the baby to flee. So there is a hierarchy. The Moro is considered the gateway reflex, blocking the development of other reflexes that help with movement and cognition. So if there's a lot of reflexes that are unintegrated, the Moro is the primary one that needs to be addressed first, or in conjunction with the other ones, because it's considered by the, you know, reflex researchers that other reflexes are unable to integrate if the Moro is still present. And it should be integrated shortly after birth into the adult startle called the Strauss reflex. In spectrum, kids on the spectrum, the body is stuck in this response. So actually, there's this combination there in the fear paralysis and in the Moro. They're kind of stuck in both. My son, he's 18. Maybe when he was about, my son with autism, when he was about like 11, or no, maybe more like 9. When he was 9, I decided, me and his older brother, we were playing, like we would try to scare each other. So I stood outside Joshua, the son's bedroom door, and I waited for him to come out, and I scared him, and I said, boo, in a really, kind of like, and he screamed for like the entire day in the car. And, he might stop for a little bit, and then it's just the memory. And for days he would remember. And even after that, months later, if there was, let's say it was Halloween time and I was going to just say the word casually boo because I was, I don't know, referring to a ghost or something, and it just brought the same emotion back. And so it was a very, very, very extreme reaction, moral reaction. And in fact, what was funny is that when his teacher, we were at the same school, and she had some books for Halloween, and I saw she had this one book that we had in the house, and I said, well, you better be careful, because when I read that book to him, I couldn't say the word boo, or it would bring back all those feelings. But she said, oh no, I've read this book. You didn't have a problem. So it was very situational too. So it was the memory, it was about me saying it and everything. So it was very interesting. So anyway, there's a constant flooding of neurotransmitters and cortisol. So what happens is when you're in this fight or flight, your body's trying to run. You get all these there's this whole cascade of, one thing leads to another, which leads to another. Cortisol stimulated, which is from your adrenals. And these kids tend to be very, we don't use the term adrenal fatigue anymore, but their adrenals are very exhausted, okay? Because the cortisol is basically shooting out all day, every day, most of the time. In both the fear paralysis and the Moro, which we said the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest section of the nervous system, is underactive, and there's poor vagal tone. Hypersensitivities with one or more senses so these children tend to be very hypersensitive with at least one or more of the senses, like with light, if their pupils are dilated because their pupils can't constrict, or to the sound, or to touch. It may not be all of them, it may just, or maybe just one or two senses. Their vestibular related problems, poor balance, poor coordination, as well as motion sickness, because the Moro reflex, if you remember, has to do with one of the ways we elicit it is through head position. And in your inner ear, you have your balance system, which is the vestibular system. And as that, if the Moro is not integrated, the vestibular system may not be working properly, and can lead to motion sickness. So when kids are car sick, there's a couple reflexes that are really related to that. And so usually if they're car sick, it has to do with your vestibular system, maybe some inflammation from chronic ear infections and antibiotics, but always first need to check the Moro and a couple other reflexes that we'll talk about later. They can have immature eye movements and difficulty processing rapidly approaching visual stimulus. So for example, if somebody's throwing them the ball and they can't process the ball that's coming toward them. They have general insecurity or anxiety, fearfulness, including panic attacks and mood swings, as well as aggressive outbursts. This is an interesting one. They may be manipulative in order to maintain control. kids and adults who have active Moro need to be in control, okay? And I'm saying this from some experience, but I didn't like realize this until, you know, more recently in my life, but you can kind of spot the kids who kind of have to dominate the conversation, have to dominate the situation. They have pretty certain that they have an active Moro. This is the limbic system. This part right here, which is obviously not really these colors, but this part, this inner part. The limbic system, the amygdala is like right here. The limbic system is the part of the brain that is more connected with the Moro, because the sensory information has to get processed. It goes through the limbic system, and the amygdala and the thalamus, they have to decide, they have to immediately decide if that stimulus was a threat or not a threat. So what happens is they're finding that the amygdala tends to be like inflamed, and there's other issues that can be, the amygdala might not be connected well to the frontal cortex or to the brainstem. Especially the frontal cortex also is able to inhibit responses. So if there's very little connection between this part and this part of the brain, because it needs to be connected, then the response is just going to get out of control. The limbic system is responsible for regulating the inner environment and plays an important part of the relationship of the individual to the surrounding world. It receives information from the world by signals from the tactile, proprioceptive, vestibular, auditory, visual, taste, and olfactory or smell senses. Proprioceptive is the sense of knowing where you are in space, and vestibular is that balance system we talked about. Signals from the vagus nerve include information about the inner environment. Well, here we go again. I sure was not on the ball with this one. For example, the stomach and the intestines, the lung and the heart. The limbic system can be activated even by our thoughts. So it's not just the actual physical stimulus from the outside or even from the inside, but our thoughts. When we remember something, we can get sad, or we can be happy. So the amygdala is an important structure of the limbic system. There could be inflammation or poor connections in the frontal lobe, like we said. The terrible twos is a time where the limbic system is developing and it's not yet connected to the frontal lobe. In fact, I'd like to argue that a lot of 21-year-olds do not have their frontal lobe quite connected. So as the limbic system is developing, and they just get way overstimulated, and they just don't know how to process that. And if children miss the terrible twos, and you're like, oh, I was so lucky, kind of like me, I have a son, another son who missed the terrible twos. When they hit the other growth spurt of the limbic system, when they're in their teens, then it could be a lot worse. They could be really moody. They could have a lot of maybe depression or other types of mood disorders, or being, teenagers, we know they're typically a little bit cranky. So there may be periods of readjustment and emotional ups and downs as the limbic system is developing. So when we are integrating reflexes, are integrating the Moro, we are dealing with the limbic system, and sometimes as it's starting to mature, some of those kids that didn't pass through the terrible twos, or maybe didn't hit a certain developmental stage, it will. And so sometimes it'll act like, oh, well, now they almost feel worse, but actually they're progressing through those stages that they didn't hit. Here's a picture of the autonomic nervous system. There's the parasympathetic side and the sympathetic side. The sympathetic side this is all the fight or flight. This is the rest and digest. So the same organs, for the example, the eyes. In the sympathetic, the eyes dilate because you're looking at the environment. You're running away from the lion, and you want to see, you want to have yeah, so you want to have a good like vision, peripheral vision. In the parasympathetic, you're more relaxed. You for the heart, your heart accelerates, your lungs dilate because you want to have more oxygen. Your digestive system is inhibited because you don't need to be digesting that food while you're running away from the lion. And in your bladder constriction, because the last thing you want to have to do when you're running away from the lion is to have to stop and go to the bathroom. So it inhibits that. When you're in your rest and digest, it activates the bladder and the digestive system, but lowers the oxygen and the heart rate. Okay, so the fear paralysis, the Moro, and the entrance of the vagus nerve reside in the lowest part of the brain stem, which is called the medulla. If these are not integrated and the vagus nerve is not stimulated, then the higher parts of the brain are not going to properly develop, to mature, and to link up. The brain stem should have strong connections with the limbic system, and the limbic system in turn should have good connections with the frontal lobe. So in a good, healthy brain, the brain stem is connected strongly to the limbic system, and then the limbic system is also connected strongly to the frontal lobe. Therefore, there's connections between the brainstem and the frontal lobe. And then the frontal lobe, which is the executive function, it can kind of send some commands of, about how not to respond. So therefore, a mature brainstem affects both emotions, which is the limbic system, and cognition or thinking, which is in the frontal cortex, in the frontal lobe. Your muscles remember the emotions from your whole life. So the muscle tensions can be trapped emotions. Chronic diseases and cancers often have an emotional root because specific emotions go to specific organs. And so, for example, we know that Christopher Reeve's wife, right? She passed away not too long after he did of lung cancer, but she was not a smoker, right? But grief is the emotion that's attached to the lungs. So we know that your emotions are trapped in your organs, and it's also trapped in your muscle memory. So if you have tight shoulders, neck, back, and the back of the legs can be physical responses to stress. And altogether, if you experience altogether, that's the tendon guard response, because as your body, if it's sensing danger, it's like being put on alert, and your body tenses up. So what I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to do a little experiment. So if you are not in the car and you are somewhere at home where you can stand up and you don't have, you have some space, I would like you to do this, because what we're going to do is we're going to illustrate about how our memory is in our muscles. So what I want you to do, if you could stand up and just kind of where you are, where you can still hear me, I want you to pick a spot in the room where you are to represent a classroom or a workshop or some kind of learning experience that was very pleasant, that you really enjoyed and you couldn't wait to go. So when you get to a little section of the room that you say, this is my spot, think about what that experience is going to be. And I want you to stand there and just be in that room and notice your breathing, notice your muscle tension, in your neck, in your back, in your legs. Your breathing is you're using the diaphragm, which is a muscle. So if you have shallow breathing, that is that's your diaphragm. Or if you're relaxed, think about how your motivation for being there. Then what I want you to do is we're going to just do some body checks. I want you to just stand there, relax, and I want you to just kind of sway from one side to the other. And as you do that, I want you to notice which side if you're going to one side more easily than the other, if it seems balanced, or how does that feel? Just kind of notice that. Also, I want you to kind of rock back and forth where you're kind of going forward and backwards, and notice how the ease or dis-ease of that. And then I want you to kind of go up and down, just kind of squat down a little bit and come back up and see if it seems heavy or light to either go up or down in either direction. So now what I want you to do is you're going to pick a different spot in the room, and you're going to move toward that spot, and it's going to be the classroom or learning experience that was something that totally opposite, that you did not enjoy, you dreaded going, you didn't want to be there, or maybe it was an event, something traumatic, like humiliating happened in a classroom. So I want you to think about an event or a classroom or an experience, move over to the other spot. And I want you to notice your breathing, if it's changed, your muscle tensions in your neck, in your back, in your legs, your motivation for being there. What is your inner thoughts? What are you saying to yourself in this situation? And then we're going to do the 3 checks again. We're going to go side to side, front and back, and up and down. And then I want you just to notice if there's a change from before. Because your muscles have a memory of this experience. Now, I don't want to leave you in this state, so what I'm going to just have you do is I'm going to have you do some cross crawls. So where you're standing and you're kind of marching in place, but you're putting one hand on the opposite knee as you're marching. Just do that a few times. Now I want you to put your fingertips on the on your forehead gently and hold it there for a few seconds. And until your body feels ready. And when your body feels ready that you can move on, then I want you to do some hookups. And the hookups, now I don't have, the one thing on Facebook is I cannot toggle between the screen and my video, but last week I think I taught you how to do hookups. You can cross your feet, extend your arms out in front of you, point your thumbs down toward the ground, cross your arms over, clasp your fingers, and you can bring that your hands like up towards your chest, or you can just leave them down. And just hold your tongue inside your mouth, on top of the roof of your mouth, and just take some deep breaths. And slowly breathe in and breathe out. And when your body feels ready, you can uncross your feet, and then you can put your fingertips and touch your fingertips toward each other. You can uncross your arms and then just touch your fingertips to each other. And now you can recheck. You can check your breathing if it's changed, your muscle tensions in your neck, in your back, in your legs, in your motivation. And then you can sway side to side to see if that has changed. Front and back. Up and down. Okay, so what we're demonstrating here, hopefully there was a change after you've done a few exercises. So we're demonstrating that your muscle has memory for emotions and that there's an emotional stamp, and B, that with some simple exercises or activities that we're able to shift that and make changes in our brain and our limbic system and the way that our brain is processing that memory. So all learning experiences have an emotional stamp with it by the limbic system, which is in that middle part of the brain. So if you're a teacher, this is a huge concept. So when I was working with children who were struggling in math, I had to spend a lot of time in the beginning having to get the kids to realize that they didn't have to be afraid of math, because somewhere there was some negative emotional stamp on math, and every time that it was math time, that emotion surfaces back up. So stress and cortisol. So cortisol helps with memories. So that, when you're under stress, it releases cortisol from your adrenals. We need cortisol to help with memory. So we need the excitement to learn. And some kids nowadays, it seems like a little bit more than others. Too much cortisol, however, suppresses the memories. So you need some cortisol, but not too much. And an overload of cortisol can erode the connections between the neurons and destroy memories. So if a potential memory comes along during stress, it has a more difficult time recruiting neurons to be part of its own new circuit. So therefore, it is chronic stress that makes it hard to learn new material, not necessarily a lack of motivation. I had kids who were the type that just tried so hard, they just could not learn or remember. Other sources of stress, all stress is not emotional. We have things like toxins, heavy metals, viruses, parasites, food sensitivities, toxins, chemicals or what have you. And these topics are going to be discussed in the online parent course that I'm putting together that I would like to launch in September. So if you are interested in learning about that side of learning, then please let me know or go to my website and you can sign up. So how to test the Moro. So so if you're testing a child, you don't have to test them because it's pretty obvious. When they are hypersensitive, when they startle easily, I mean, it's pretty obvious when a child has an active Moro. If they're dominating the situation, it might be subtle and then you need a test. And if you're an adult, you might be able to compensate. And so then you also might not need a test. So you have the person lay down on their back, gently have their head in your hands, a little bit raised, and then suddenly kind of drop the head position, not too, just drop the head position, but you're kind of still guiding it, so nothing's gonna happen. Or you can stand behind a standing or lying client and clap loudly and notice the reaction. They can also tilt their head backwards and then clap loudly, because sometimes that head tilt and then the clap have a different reaction. You can suddenly wave your hand in front of their eyes, quickly tap their hands on their upper arms, just giving them lots of different stimulus to see how they react. When they're lying on their back, their knees are up, you can swiftly bring the legs down, like kind of by under their ankles. You can kind of move their feet so now their body is all straight. And just notice in a reaction how they feel. Sometimes they're just going to be reacting just to that visual stimulus, so putting your hands in front of their face, or maybe just the loud noise. And again, you rarely have to test a child. If you're the parent, you're going to pretty much know. So how to support the Moro? You need to address the sympathetic nervous system. So you need to get that parasympathetic to come online by activating the vagus nerve. And remember, we're in a breathing pattern. So those in the sympathetic state are engaged in shallow breathing versus deep breathing. So the very, very, very first thing we have to do is teach the kids how to breathe. So what to do? So When we integrate a reflex, one of the ways is to do exercises that follow the pattern, and so that is the Starfish, and I'm going to show you a couple videos to show you how to do that. You may have already seen them online. I mean, they're kind of all over. Also, you can hold your left thumb and left index finger together and then clasp that with your right hand. So that helps balance out the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Giving deep pressure and deep massages to especially children who struggle. All the kids, they all love deep pressure. A lot of them can't even feel their bodies, so they just need that extra input. I'm using things like essential oils that we talked about last week, such as lavender, ylang ylang, or other ones that you can go back to that video. I'm passively moving the children's bottom side to side while they're laying on their stomach. Just kind of take their britches and move it back and forth. That helps stimulate the cerebral spinal fluid flow. And again, deep breathing exercises. So the belly needs to inflate like a balloon when inhaling, not going up into your, like, you know, where a lot of times when we breathe in, the belly goes flat and up into the lungs, like the diaphragm goes up. So we need that diaphragm to be relaxed, and so the belly expands. So put like a little stuffed animal on their belly, have them breathe in, and have the belly go up. Stay hydrated. Pretty much, I mean, that's the first thing you have to start doing, is just making sure that there's enough water. And then try removing dairy, gluten, and all toxic chemicals from your environment and hygiene products. Dairy specifically, if there's a dairy sensitivity, it targets the limbic system. So kids who have like rage or just emotional outbursts, dairy is a big culprit. Toxic chemicals in general just exasperates everything. And you might be surprised in your house where you might find chemicals, things that you put on your body, you know, even your toilet paper, if it has like colored dyes in it or whatever. So you might want to take a good check around your house. Okay, here's the Starfish. I'm gonna show you how to do the Starfish. So this is me teaching how to do, this is my son. And basically I'm gonna say well, anyway, I think I say it in the video, so I'm gonna show you. Guys, we're gonna do the Starfish, or as a lot of people call it. We're going to start by having our right leg crossed, our right arm over our left arm, and our head down. And we're going to come out slowly on the count of 5. And we're going to end up with some kind of a pillow or something here, because we want that head to be a little bit more tipped back when it gets to the ground. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice and slowly open up, take it in a deep breath. And up, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we want the left side to be on top. There we go. And this does help them to differentiate right from left after a while. Back, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Good. And up, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this is very important for the Moro. And back, 2, 3, 4. So essentially, so when they're coming in and crossing, every time they're either crossing their right leg and arm on top or their left leg arm on top. And that's really helpful for them to start remembering where they were, and B, differentiating their right and their left. Okay, so here I have a video, just a really quick, where I do it in a group setting. So here's my son again, and I had a group. And then in a group setting, I use the metronome. And his pillow's a little bit too low. Oh, actually, you can't hear the metronome if I lower the volume. 2, 3, 4, 5. Left on top. Using the wiggle cushion is helpful because he has such poor balance. 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's good for his balance too. But usually they put the pillow a little bit higher.
2, 3, 4, 5. Back, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, anyway, you get the point. So you can do it if you're a teacher, you can do it in a group setting too. I put the metronome on. And anyway, okay, so in October 26th to 27th, I'm planning on teaching the Bluebird Rhythmic Movement Training course. I'm going to be advertising this through all these weeks. So that in that course, we teach how to do rhythmic movements as a way to integrate primitive reflexes and isometric integrations as a way to more quickly integrate the reflexes. So if you're interested, here's the QR code, and I hope that you might be interested in that. Or if you're interested in the parent online course that's going to focus more on the role of toxicity in our kids with learning behavior and other neurological disorders, that is going to be an online group course. The BRMT class that I just showed is live because it has to be live, but this one we can do online. And this is going to start sometime in September. And I'm not exactly sure the date, but you can, already register for that. Next week, this was a long session today, but next week is going to be much shorter and to the point as we talk about the mouthing reflexes. So it's not quite so complicated. But as you can see, the fear paralysis and the Moro reflex are rooted, they're deep rooted, and it's kind of like the root of all our emotional issues. It's the root, it's the, the Moro is the gateway to integrating other reflexes. So those are really key reflexes that we need to integrate. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat box below. And otherwise, we'll see you next week and putting children first.